Okay, so Death of a Naturalist focuses on the relationship of nature between the protagonist, the narrator, and his surroundings. So what I'm going to do first of all, as I always do, is draw my context box. So I'm just going to do that up here. Okay, just a reminder that context is the inclusion and awareness of things that surround a text. So what was happening at the time, what life was like, the author's life, and remember that with your poetry it's a third of the marks, so we need to be aware of it. So Seamus Heaney is a celebrated Irish poet. He died in 2013, and this poem was written in 1966. When he was 12 years old, his brother died, his younger brother, who was 4. He died in a road accident. And that had a really big impact on Seamus, and so he typically writes about his youth in the heat, and already I'm highlighting a few different things here. So, in the heart, sorry, I said heat, didn't I? All year here already, in terms of nature, we have the inclusion of all of the seasons, includes all seasons. Flax down. Flax is like a thin, dry grass that grows around water. I put that in the same colour as festered because these two verbs, they're both doing actions. Out of any type of word choice, they're both quite gross and disgusting. Remember, disgusting's with a G, not a C. Weighted down by huge sods. Now, sods are things of mud with a bit of grass on, so they're weighted down by huge bits of mud. Blue bottles wove a strong gauze of sound around the smell. This part here, the consonants that I'm just highlighting there, the use of that highlights those consonants. Would help if I could spell consonants. Bubbles, gargled, that repeated consonant. It almost sounds as though we can hear those bubbles. It's onomatopoeia, onomatopoeia, smell. Now, obviously, they didn't actually weave a gauze around it, so this is going to be a metaphor. Am I going to have anywhere to put it? I can just fit it there. I'm just going to put metaphor around the smell. So we've got here as well with sound and smell. If you watched the previous video on To Autumn, we've got sensory language, the idea of talking about the senses. So things that we can smell, things that we can see. Now I'd go as far to say that was the warm, thick slobber. Now, words like best, better are superlatives. Superlatives. And that tells us that this is the ultimate extreme. So this really is the superior to everything else. Best of all was the warm, thick slobber. And this is what's interesting, is he says it's the best thing, but actually this sounds absolutely disgusting. Warm, thick slobber. And actually seasons, nature. I would fill jam potfuls of the jellied specks to range on windowsills at home. We get the first mention of the protagonist here, of the narrator, with I. And we know that that is first person. And because Heaney tends to write about his own life, he grew up in rural Ireland, we could assume that maybe this is a bit autobiographical. So he's got two main locations here, home and school. And yet we've also got obviously his relationship with nature and the landscape where he tends to hang around. And wait and watch until the fattening dots burst into nimble swimming tadpoles. I've underlined and because I'm going to show you something down here that makes that important. Fattening dots, again, they're not fattening dots, they're actually frog spawn, so that is a metaphor. Enjambment here, I've just put ENJ there, enjambment, where the line goes over without any punctuation. Now, you could say a couple of things about enjambment there. You could say that it reflects the circle of nature, that it carries on, that it's everlasting, that we've got the frog's lifespan, life cycle. You could talk about lots and lots of different things about what that reflects, even the fact that because it carries on, it could act as though it is being like the frog spawn, circular motion, who knows, of the connective or conjunction, whichever you use, and again reaffirms that he's a child, but also that maybe he's quite excited by this. You could tell the weather by frogs too. Now, clearly that's a metaphor or an old wives' tale or an idiom. For they were yellow in the sun and brown in rain. Now here we've got some pathetic fallacy, sun, rain. And with those we've got an association of colour on rain. And thinking about pathetic fallacy here, so remember the weather reflects the mood. Pathetic fallacy. If sun is happiness, we're finishing on rain, which could be almost foreshadowing that something bad might happen. It could be sadness, that things are going to change. A really interesting word to finish on there. So we're going to look next at this stanza. Okay, so we're going to look at the second stanza now. Here there's a clear shift in tone. Okay, so here is what we call a volta. They're most prevalent, used in sonnets. However, they do generally mean a change in tone in a poem, a turning point. And I'll come back to why that's the volta in a minute. Then one hot day when fields were rank with cow dung in the grass and angry frogs invaded the flaxstan. Now, first thing I want to talk about here is that we've got a similar opening to this stanza, and that's because we had a negative approach to nature in the first stanza when it started, when things were festering and sweltering and punishing. And here we've got rank, angry, invaded. And so again, these, well, rank, adjective, angry, adjective, invaded, verb, they're all very aggressive and disgusting essentially with rank. And again, we've got the heat. That is also pathetic fallacy. When we think about heat, it could be thinking about emotions such as rage, through hedges to a coarse croaking that I'd not heard before. Again, we've got the other mention of I. There aren't many in this poem, but there's one there. I ducked through hedges. Now this verb, ducked, okay, when we think about why would we be doing that? Why would he be doing that? It's almost as though he's hiding. We can infer that he's fearful. To a coarse croaking. Now coarse obviously being kind of rough. We've got that consonant there, the coarse croaking, that harsh C. The air is it seems really thick and it's really hard to breathe. It feels like you're breathing in hot air. That's kind of what it's like. Right down the dam, gross-bellied frogs were cocked on sods. Now here, again, we've got this gross-bellied adjectives there. The gross-bellied, they're disgusting. These large, obese bellied frogs were. Now this just means kind of prepared. They're sitting up, they're waiting. Some hopped, the slap and plop or obscene threats. Now I've purposely highlighted the use of that consonants, that P there, because that really emphasizes the onomatopoeia that's being used, and that really highlights those verbs, those some hops, the slap and plop, those nouns as well. Obscene threats. So obscene is something that is offensive. It's so list of 3, and that really highlights his disgust, his fear. But also we could infer that he's a bit of a coward. He's running away from frogs, essentially. So don't forget that. But if we remember, he is still a child. We're not sure what age now because there was a time shift, but that would make sense. And the great slime kings were gathered there for vengeance. Obviously a metaphor, which not necessarily in an aggressive way or a harsh way, but definitely the idea of grabbing motion. So overall, this poem, we've got those 2 stanzas with the volta in the middle, and the main reason I put about the volta is that we have a real positive end and general theme in the first stanza, and then the second one really takes a negative and dark turn.